Our world is breaking down. In the wreckage of globalization and supply-side economics, we find a move towards authoritarianism and oligarchy as the wealthy consolidate resources and attempt to break apart democracy. Many believe that the future is bleak, but destruction is just as much chaos and death as it is potential and new life. In the moments of our lives when everything is falling apart, we cannot see the new things being born. And I believe that is the truth of our world right now as well. History teaches us that through time and space, humans have endured in one form or another, and while this form may not endure, the original form of humanity will survive. In North of North, a sitcom that takes place in the Arctic and centers around Inuit communities, we see how this has and can still be the case. While tech bros and fascist leaders try to tell us that we must become slaves to their whims, people in places like Nunavut in the Arctic and in similar communities around the world endure, holding their neighbors and families together. Because while we will only be discussing North of North today, I can honestly say that these ideas of a society have been creeping into mass consciousness for quite some time. From Abbott Elementary to Yellowstone, even chewing gum, I keep seeing these TV shows made by creators from these communities, pushing forward the idea that small communities are everything. Places where everyone knows each other's names, have their best interests at heart, and live in harmony as best as they can in the face of structural failures. Rather than the dream of globalization that marked the 2010s, the 2020s are being marked with a return to community, to home as a physical space. North of North, in my opinion, is a kind of clear embodiment of many of these sensibilities. So, a quick disclaimer. My goal of this video is to say that the Inuit concept of community being everything is important right now for the entirety of the globe, because everyone is looking for a place to belong. I am not an expert on Native communities, and certainly not an expert on Inuit culture. So I'm gonna say right here that if this comes off cringe in any way, I apologize in advance. I have been agonizing over this script because I'm probably going to say something wrong, or mispronounce something, or miss something. I hope that you will forgive me. And while Native culture is important to this conversation, I'm not going to be focusing on the specifics of this culture too much, any more than to say that it is merely an example of a regional culture. The region could be anywhere. Like I said before, the only important thing here is what Helen says when Siaya asks her for a job.
I've been here for a while now, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the Inuit culture cares most about what the community needs.
So I'm not trying to say that Inuit culture is amazing or natives are amazing or something else weird or cringe, but rather that this one principle from their world really applies to the world at large right now. Initially, I thought of doing this exact video in relation to Abbott Elementary, which focuses on a school in West Philadelphia, or Yellowstone, which focuses on a ranch in Montana. I landed on North of North because it's short, sweet, and to the point. So let's rewind the clock a little bit. How did we get to this messed up moment in time? Well, a chunk of the 2010s was marked with ever-growing globalization and technology. People thought that the future was this bright, capitalist, tech world where the internet was going to provide so many jobs and our lives would become perfect. Get into technology and learn about data science and the Internet of Things and smart homes, and how all of this will be integrated into our lives. Even before this time, I can remember movies and TV shows from my childhood that predicted the future of school as being a hologram from home, or holographic pop stars as the cutting edge of the future of entertainment. We all thought that maps would be irrelevant and the future would be perfect as tech made things easier. But underneath the surface, there were sinister forces at work. Mind you, not some cabal or conspiracy, but business, neoliberalism, and globalization. These invisible forces of business were building their invisible worlds for years. But globalization wasn't a dirty word when it started. I remember the Arab Spring in 2011. There was this sense that more connection with each other would be a good thing, that the internet and business paired together would be amazing. Click a button and just have anything delivered to you. Make things was faster, easier, and more efficient for business, but also in our personal lives. But instead, over time, it has hollowed out our communities and made our lives more difficult. Resources earmarked for our local communities instead have gone towards building the invisible world of the internet. These resources went towards business with the intent of creating ever more globalized communities, but this fundamentally discounted human nature's emotional needs, and people became sick of it. There were a number of other things wrong with globalization. I'm not going to get into specifics, but as people became sick of it, there was this pushback, like Brexit and the 2016 presidential election in the US. This pushback is still happening globally in a variety of ways, but I was struck by how the process of the pushback seems to be the same everywhere, whether it's populism or being community-minded, whether you espouse progressive ideas or right-wing ones. It's safe to say that most people are sick of this ever-increasing connectivity which devalues ordinary communities in a variety of ways. Whether it works or is misguided, it's all led by this sense that community matters, places matter, and that the physical world is just as important as the internet and the business elite, if not more important. The pandemic was sort of a realization of this global one-world dream. No contact with anyone. Working from home, doing school at home, constantly being on the internet, being able to see everything and everyone we want all the time, have everything delivered. During this time, the tech world flourished under the restrictions. It's funny because we thought we wanted the future to be like this, but truly, most people remember it as a really hard time. Isolating, lonely, alien, and depressing. As they say, there are two tragedies in life. One is not getting what we want, and the other is getting it. So, in the wake of the pandemic and into the post-pandemic period, people are trying to prioritize their overall health and well-being. And part of that is being in the real world. It's going out and seeing friends, attending events like concerts, eating at restaurants, getting beauty treatments, all the things that we took for granted and never realized we really needed. And after the growth of tech for those first 2 years between 2020 and 2022, there was a huge drop-off in the hiring, in the expansion, in all of these companies' success. And the dream of globalization as some utopia died because we saw the dark side of it. Now, the connections that we have right now, our social media and smartphones, even working from home, are all well and good, but it's not something people really want anymore. It's not something we wish to advance. Because on a fundamental level, business and globalization sought to change the very fabric of our communities in ways that we didn't like. While the social justice aspects of globalization have been good in many ways, the neo-colonial, neo-racist ideologies often espoused by modern capitalism have destroyed things that many people were happy with. Jobs of all varieties have changed, often for the worse. Factories, small businesses, farming, and more, things that are the fabric of small communities, aren't prioritized in the face of superstores and major tech companies. Change isn't necessarily a bad thing, but people have been unsatisfied with the direction of the changes that globalization and supply-side economics have brought. Places like the Arctic, as shown in North of North, are real places with history and people. It's a place that, with the melting of the ice in the north, is going to become incredibly important with time. We'll talk a little more about that later. And it's also the kind of place that is mysterious to most of the world. The history of the Arctic isn't something that most people learn in school. So this show is a kind of advocacy for this historically marginalized community as well. North of North tells a story of the Inuit people of the Arctic. These people have lived there for thousands of years, been colonized and subject to the atrocities that many native people have known. But in North of North, we hear their story in a meaningful way. It's important to understand that while there are many interesting characters and stories here, it is first and foremost the story of a place. And that is truly important because even the title of the show gives away that this is not a story of an individual coming of age, though that is a component. This is a story about a place and its community, which is an important component of pushing back against globalization. The internet is a place without clear boundaries, but on maps, places have clear boundaries. This show defines both the boundaries of this community as well as the physical boundaries of these spaces as a means of protection against outside forces. There is in fact a real town called Iqaluit Nunavut. The creators of this show, Stacey Aglock MacDonald and Alethea Arncook Burrill, are from this place and of this background. They film at these places as much as possible. North of North was actually filmed in Iqaluit, where the lead actress Anna Lam was born and raised. They used local people as background actors, so she claimed that much of her reactions while filming were genuine because she knew everyone there. This show is good for a number of reasons, but in my opinion, specifically because post-pandemic, this is the world we all wish we lived in. Tight-knit spaces that are filled with people we see every day, small businesses and comfortable bars and restaurants, which are familiar and safe. The internet, with its location doesn't matter approach, is all well and good, but Web3 and the metaverse failed because they can't understand that humanity sits in places. People don't migrate unless they have to. It is our natural impulse to seek comfort and familiarity, legacy and ancestry. It doesn't matter if it's in a city, the suburbs, a town, or out in nature. Everyone wants these things. In modern times especially, the economic pressures of globalization, the environmental pressures of climate change, the stress of war and strife force us to move, usually unwillingly. Native people seem to be best positioned to understand this better than the rest of us. If you're not familiar with the term indigenous, it refers to someone who is an original inhabitant of a place. Natives around the world settled in certain places and became so tied to those lands that they never left. In fact, among the Western Apache in Arizona, the people are so tied to their land, the whole community can merely say the name of a place on their land, and everyone knows what specific event or collective memory they are talking about. If you want to know more about that phenomenon, the anthropologist Keith Basso records their culture, and if you're interested in learning more, I've linked his book below. There seems to be a similar sense in the Arctic, and this is something that anyone who has roots in a place can tell you about. A sense that one's community, home, and landmarks matter. Places can become magical in their own ways, for their history, for the connection people feel to them, or their natural beauty. In a globalized world where every place is accessible through a computer screen, where maps are made irrelevant by the connection of an internet cable, centering places as a sensory experience changes the conversation. You must see it and feel it to believe it. And this is where we meet our main character, Siaya. While this story is about the community, we need a main character. And in this case, we have the most main character I have ever seen, and her name is Siaya. Siaya has been married since graduating high school and has a 7-year-old child. She's been living as a housewife since then. And she's stuck in a bit of a rut. She leaves her emotionally abusive husband after falling off the back of his boat during a seal hunt. Floating in the ice-cold water, she sees the sea goddess, Nuliayuk, in a near-death experience. Realizing the true depth of her dissatisfaction, Siaya sets out to reclaim her personhood and become a force for good in her community. Initially, she aims to transition from volunteer at the local community center to a program coordinator, but instead she gets hired as the executive assistant to the director. But she does so by helping the community. Her identity is tied up in her community, in her heritage, and in her home. She quickly sets out to help Ice Cove, first organizing an elders night at the community center that is so much fun a man drops dead, setting up a charity baseball game to beat the neighboring town and procure much needed funding for the community center. She even managed to get a satellite office of a polar research station to set up shop in town. Even after leaving her jerk husband, she helps to save his life when he is lost while hunting, offering up a solution for where he might be, because after all, jerk or not, he's still a father to her child. Siaya is a gem, offering help everywhere she can, redefining what it means to be a modern Inuk woman. Not just a housewife keeping all that she has to give behind closed doors in her house, but a modern woman using her gifts to better her community, because the message from the beginning is very clear. The community is everything. Through her eyes, we see Ice Cove and all aspects of the community, the physical and spiritual dimensions of the town, the locations, the people, both native and outsiders, and the way that the outside governance fails at nurturing her hometown. Through the characters, we define who is and isn't an Inuk, and what it means to truly belong to this place. Helen, the director of the community center, is very obviously a southerner, meaning anyone from south of Nunavut or an outsider, but has married into the community and runs the town, though often somewhat poorly due to her lack of knowledge of the place. There are other members of the community, like Siaya's friends Colin, Millie, and Elizabeth, who all work at the community center. Siaya's ex-husband Ting, aka King Ting, who is, well, insufferable. Nevi, Siaya's awesome mom, who runs an outfitting shop giving people necessary supplies and generally being awesome. Though Nevi is a bit of a complicated character, as we later learned, because she was forced to attend residential school and became an alcoholic. She struggled to raise Siaya as a single mother with issues, and we'll learn why that is later on. Especially when Alistair, a southerner who is an environmental consultant, shows up at the end of episode 1 and Siaya learns that he is her father. His associate Cook is native, but seems to have spent a lot of his life away from native communities, traveling for work with his girlfriend and kind of being uncertain of his path, despite his parents having a powerful status within the community. And of course, a whole bunch of background actors who are from Nunavut who help to fill out the community. But what makes this community into a community? What makes a place a place? Well, if I haven't made it clear yet, there's a lot of boundary drawing in this show. In this case, both cultural and identity-oriented boundaries, as well as physical boundaries of places. To define a community, we have to draw boundaries around it. And when you're living inside those boundaries, you don't really see them. But the things within those boundaries, like the food, from Arctic char chowder to caribou to raw meat, to the local language of Inuk, to the traditions like the Spring Festival, all of these things help to create the boundaries of the community. There are a lot of small details baked into the show that capture the reality of life in this place, things that I can't really understand without making a deep dive into the culture. So without giving a college level course on Inuit culture, I'll highlight what is visible to all of us clearly. Ice Cove is a cold and small place, surrounded by the beauty of the natural landscape and the Arctic Ocean. The whole town is very small, with only a few thousand people. There aren't many bars or restaurants. There's only one radio station and like one taxi and a finite number of houses. There isn't really a local government like a mayor or anything, but the community center seems to be an important hub for the whole town, dealing with everything from the Spring Festival to large item pickup to boil water advisories and so much more. Everyone walks around in large parkas and snow boots called kamiks, specifically made of sealskin. And though it's not a walkable place because everything's covered in ice and snow, it is a very tight-knit community. Everyone gets around using snowmobiles called skidoos or pickup trucks. They eat mostly meat and a kind of bread called bannock. In the opening scene, we can see how Siaya identifies Cook, a visitor from the south, as an outsider by immediately looking at his shoes and jacket. Wearing a peacoat and Converse in the freezing Arctic is probably not a smart move. But there are also roots to this place for everyone. There are ancient names for places throughout the region, like the hills where Siaya's husband has an accident and gets stuck while hunting. Its name roughly translates to big breasts. Or the place where Alistair and Nevi had their first kiss, the aptly named Road to Nowhere. These are both personal and historically relevant places, and I'm sure there's more of them that aren't covered in the show. Hunting is much more commonplace here. Apparently, it's not uncommon to see a child using a gun to take down a caribou, and it's a huge point of pride for Siaya and the whole community. Afterwards, the practice of dismembering the meat and distributing it among the community is not something I've ever heard of. As I understand hunting in North America, people hunt and kill animals and take them home. They don't share them with anyone else. So I think this is an Inuit practice. To me, the most interesting things that make up the community aren't the big things, but the small artistic touches, like featuring a variety of Inuit singers as the background music, from throat singers to covers of modern songs in their language, such as this version of Levitating by Dua Lipa. Which I now realize I hate in every language possible. In fact, the sea goddess Nuliayuk in the first episode is played by Tanya Tagaq, an Inuit singer well known throughout Canada. The musical inspiration throughout the series, the throat singing, it's all meant to give the Inuit people a real voice, along with other little touches from the earrings and jewelry women wear, to their tattoos, to including a few words of Inuktitut here and there to help make us feel as though we are really experiencing a slice of life of a real community. It's not meant to be everything, just a peek into their lives. The authenticity of the storytelling, the characters, is something we can all connect with while feeling a bit confused about those things that we don't understand as outsiders. I know that I had never heard of walrus stick baseball, or people eating raw meat, or seal hunts, but the point is that there was a lot of stuff that I had never heard of about this community prior to watching this show, and that's cool. It shows us the value of this place as it is. It welcomes us as strangers, but also draws boundaries around itself. In a world of constant and sometimes stupid changes, it's nice to see places that have stood the test of time. And the internet, modern media, globalized business, they don't seem to be particularly important in a place like this. In this place, outsiders are welcome, but they have to be willing to attach to the values of the place before anything else. In North of North, Helen, Cook, and Alistair are all technically outsiders, but they respect the rules of the community and put it first as best as they can. Even Helen seems to have married into the community, and is not just the administrative head of the community because she's a Southerner. Cook's parents are very important in the community, even though he's been living away from it, and Alistair worked in the region for a while when he was younger, only leaving when Nevi asked him to. They work hard to fit into the community, respecting the rules set and not trying to enforce their own, though Helen sometimes doesn't seem to get it, like the place she picked for the cemetery, or placing salt on the walkways instead of sand and ruining everyone's comics. But she's willing to try, learn, and change her ways accordingly. Cook is an interesting story because technically he's an outsider, but he's not an outsider. He seems like a lost young man, good but unsure of his path. When he comes to Ice Cove, he feels like he's found his home, feeling a sense of groundedness, comfort, and familiarity. When his girlfriend arrives to take him away to her next job, he struggles to tear himself away. As they try to pick the next place to go because she travels for work, he finds himself waxing poetic about a meat delivery happening behind her, feeling such a connection. And his experience speaks to that sense that globalization, endless travel, can be quite empty. We need homes, love, people, and most of all, places. Alistair, though not a native person, feels connected to the Arctic. He has roots in the community he doesn't even realize until he meets his daughter and granddaughter. All of these outsiders make the community a priority before themselves. The traditions, the culture, the needs of the community come before anything they bring to the table. That is the boundary drawn around which outsiders are welcome and which aren't. Like Alexis, Cook's girlfriend, who had left him when he came to the Arctic with Alistair for a project. She comes up to Ice Cove to be with him, but sees the space as a blank slate, completely missing out on the beauty of the place, the heritage, and the culture of the people. They have their own world that she perceives as being empty, which sets up what I imagine will be the conflict of the next season, neocolonialism in the form of business, efficiency, and productivity. Because even though the world has changed in many ways, old ideas like this continue to persist. Colonialism comes in a new form thanks to globalization, but it's basically the same beliefs with new faces. Like when Ice Cove plays the neighboring town in a game of baseball for money to fix up their community center, and Helen's counterpart from the neighboring town is a giant, awful racist. She doesn't even make any subterfuge about it. The less said about the dog man that Siaya nearly sleeps with, the better. These old attitudes that mistreat Inuit people, or believe that their communities need to be changed somehow, reorganized, made more efficient or optimized. It's all just modern terms for old school, colonial, or racist terms about taming the uncouth or unsophisticated people. And it's funny, Helen and Alistair will always be the butt of jokes because they are white in minority communities. But to me, there is a kind of importance in that honesty. It keeps them from imposing upon the community. They are outsiders, even if they fit in, and they seem to have to fight their impulses to try and change this community. They have to be mindful of how they come off. Like when Alistair tries to help Siaya after she sets the dump on fire.
I just wanted to thank my daughter for correcting me on a few mistakes that I might have made.
Yeah. We all think of Siaya as our daughter.
Oh, no, she's my daughter.
Huh? Your daughter? What are you talking about? Is he saying this to make you look cool? I think he's trying to play white savior.
No, I'm not white saving anything.
Because sometimes, even with the best of intentions, they can mess up. Like how Helen struggles to communicate with Jeffrey, the man who runs the dump, and keeps offending him until he quits. Thankfully, Siaya is there to translate.
And she's mean. I go out of my way to give her a hand, and she'll say stuff like, "What can you do when you live in a shoe?"
Jeffrey,
That's like an old white lady saying, like, ayong nang mat. Nothing can be done.
Oh, I thought she was making fun of me because I live at a dump.
The unfortunate fact is that white people were responsible for the marginalization that these communities experienced. So there's always a feeling that those who look like outsiders in this place must be regarded with suspicion to prevent history from repeating itself. Take, for example, the most heartbreaking story, which, spoilers if you haven't watched it yet, the climax of the series, where we learn about Nevi's first daughter being stolen by her father. The true reason why she never told Siaya about her father. Or the history of residential schools that's woven throughout the series. Those old scars are still there. It's just the way it was and sometimes still is. So there is a kind of rightful guardedness in these communities. They are welcoming, but with caution. One of the defining features for this community beyond just the history of the place and the people is the way in which they have been robbed of both physical and emotional resources. Though these losses are not all that define them, as we are not the things that happen to us, but how we cope with those things. The obvious lack of financial resources is a problem. It's clear from the beginning, given the state of the center. It's falling apart, growing weird mushrooms, lacking hot water, coat hooks, light bulbs, and leaking from the ceiling. But no one lets this destroy their spirit. Siaya convinces Helen to arrange a charity baseball game with the neighboring town to make enough money to help fix up the center. She helps to organize the game as well as give a stellar presentation to the visiting government representatives to bring a polar research station to Ice Cove. Unfortunately, the neighboring town and Helen's racist counterpart buy the government contract. But her enthusiasm helps to bring a satellite office from the research station to Ice Cove. The struggle for cash and resources in towns like this highlights a key issue that has been plaguing the world for decades now. Money belongs to business. It doesn't matter if you're in West Philadelphia, rural Montana, or Ice Cove, Nunavut, the excesses of public schools, community centers, libraries, parks, and everything else that makes life better for ordinary people must be curbed. Fiscal responsibility means being responsible only to the money. Ice Cove and other places like it are not places that will ever receive big dedications or infusions of cash and resources. And they're not places that will ever be immortalized in history as centers of commerce or governance. No, Ice Cove is a kind of place that is celebrated through small moments, everyday victories and celebrations. The truly special moments here are the little things that feel huge, whether it's an event at the community center or a festival after party. The important stuff happens every day. This is the place that keeps the world turning and life moving. Small communities are the soul of our world, giving us what we need to keep humanity alive. The places where good, honest, hardworking people raise children, care for elders, preserve culture, and build wealth for billionaires. It's absurd that they should struggle so much to find and keep resources despite the invaluable nature of their worlds. Because these places don't just lose money, they break down in other ways. Lack of economic resources means a lack of emotional resources, which is devastating. Here, historical injustices have not only hollowed out financial resources, but also that of people. Siaya's mom, Nevi, is an example of how racial, economic, and social injustices can lead to difficult situations. A recovering alcoholic of 10 years, Nevi had a difficult childhood, so much so that Siaya complains she went from taking care of her to taking care of her husband, Ting. It points to a larger issue in marginalized community. They haven't just faced historical injustices or racial issues, but as a result, emotional ones that no one talks about. Nevi, from what I could understand, went to a residential school, which I can't even talk about that here. There is a whole history on what those schools did to Native children, but truly, Nevi never learned how to be a mother. Communities like this one that experience such turmoil, it changes their very fabric. In this case, mothers don't always know how to be mothers. Society acts like it's some innate thing. A child comes out and you just know how to be a mom, but it's a learned behavior. In colonized communities, places that are poor or traumatized, strained in a variety of ways, young women are the ones who face the greatest stress. If they never find that stability in themselves, how can they give it to their children? So what you end up with is young girls like Nevi who struggle to survive, or others like Siaya who mature way too fast and never really get to have a childhood. They go on to become caretakers to their partners the same way that they were caretakers for their mothers and siblings, like Siaya's husband Ting, who basically treats her like a second mother. He's not necessarily a bad guy, just raised raised with no expectation of maturity, so he never matured. Of course, not every guy is like that, and one thing this show really does is also draw boundaries around what kind of men are worth having in your life. What are the green flags that you should look for, and what is problematic? If Siaya's jaunt through Tinder with her friends is any indication, a good man is hard to find, though not impossible. There are men who are mature, grounded, decent, and do better by women, and they are usually community-minded. Cook, in my opinion, is right for Siaya, but she has to get to that realization herself. She didn't exactly have a model of a healthy relationship growing up, so she doesn't know what she deserves. So Siaya messes up with Cook in the beginning, but it makes sense that it should take her a minute before she's finally able to be with him. Both Cook and Ting are models. The stories here are drawing boundaries around what behaviors make a man worth having. Gainful employment, maturity, kindness to women and children. Someone who is emotionally strong and able to express their own feelings, not emotionally abusive or manipulative or obsessed with their own image. This story doesn't just draw boundaries around communities, but around people's behaviors, of what is acceptable and what isn't. Which guy gets the girl and which one doesn't. In the case of Ting, he's best just as the guy who hangs out in the background and takes care of his kid. He doesn't get a starring role in the show, even with all the ladies thirsting after him, because it's about making models of good behavior. Because these men aren't just models of how to treat women, but how to be good men. Cook had been traveling the world with his girlfriend and uncertain of his path. He finds meaning in being a part of this community, a place to belong and purpose through serving others. Another strong example of a good man is Alistair, who, despite being kicked out of town by Nevi 25 years ago, comes back and takes her abuse anyway, especially when he realizes that he has a daughter and a granddaughter. As Alistair is reintroduced into their lives, he takes a lot of crap from Nevi, who works her own issues out on him, but he never stops loving or caring for Siaya and his granddaughter Bun. In the end, things don't work out between him and Nevi, but he sticks around for his family anyway. A strong man is strong because he can help to hold the pain of the past. He can be a rock for the women and children in his life in a meaningful way. Cook falls for Siaya when she hands him a petition for more community programming in Ice Cove, and when she sets up an actually fun Elders Night, and through their weekly chess games. It's all about these small, simple things that speak to their love for something bigger than themselves, a way of life, a place. Life isn't like a romantic comedy where you fall in love with each other, and that's it. You have to fall in love with each other's values and visions for the world. I think that young people see that in modern times. Real relationships are built on foundations of shared goals, values, and common interests. It's not enough to just be both in the same place at the same time, or for your partner to be charming, beautiful, or intelligent. Of course, it's not to say that anyone needs a man or a woman, but we all need love in one form or another, and to build a real relationship is to build one on shared values. To me, one of the most interesting aspects of this show is how it changes the role of women. Women have suffered greatly under the rise of business and globalization, because now, on top of doing all of the household tasks and raising children, we're expected to work too. But Siaya's story offers a different pathway. The women in this community can have both work lives and family lives, connected together by similar threads of care, comfort, and joy. To care for a community, rather than just yourself, means being someone special, and the world needs those special, passionate people who can love and give unconditionally. Siaya opens the series saying that she is a modern Inuk woman, but she's not sure what that looks like. I would argue that the series sort of defines what a modern Inuk woman is. To be a modern Inuk woman is to be someone who pays homage to tradition and community, but also isn't afraid to put herself first when necessary. Not in terms of amassing financial resources, more in terms of self-care and boundaries. Being a so-called girl boss in your community, working for the betterment of your community, means that you get to see the direct impact of your work every day. And you don't have to choose between building a family or working, a dichotomy which seems to leave many women's lives empty. Being part of a community means that you always have people to watch your kids. You don't have to leave them to strangers. There are women in this town who often don't have kids because there are other kids who need them, because you don't have to have children by birth in order to experience raising and caring for a kid. Multi-generational communities also mean that kids get to learn and spend time with aunts, uncles, grandparents, and other elders like Bun does in the Ice Cove Community Center. In fact, the key to Siaya's amazing Elders Night is bringing children in to hang out with the old people. Here, your programs, your ideas have an immediate impact on your world. To attempt to make a difference in a community outside of your home, but specifically a community, not a corporation, seems to be a rewarding path in a way that making money in a professional setting could never be. It's similar challenges, how to procure money for a project, interfacing with suits and bigwigs, doing bureaucratic nonsense, wearing blazers and pearls. But your product is the joy on a person's face, not the dollars in your pocket, which in the age of meaning deficit that is our lifetime sounds pretty incredible to me. Even for people like Cook and Alistair, ambition is an empty word. For most of us, finding a home, a community, a meaningful relationship, a family of some kind, all of those things will be so much more important than bringing home the bacon. This is no longer the age of lining one's pockets, but the age of service. It is something that has been coming into public consciousness as costs rise and jobs turn into jokes. Even those who do make living wages would agree that money can't buy meaningful things anymore. It can give us the stability we need, but the true fulfillment in life comes from hobbies, interests, friends, family, partners, kids, neighbors, and building a community we feel happy and comfortable in. All of this pushback against the gutting of the federal government in America, against business as a culture globally, against idiotic billionaires, and anti-DEI practices, and all of the things that devalue community and local culture is rooted in these post-pandemic realizations. When people have near-death experiences, when things get hard like they did during the pandemic, we realize who and what is really important, and the spell of the superficial world breaks around us. Sort of like Siaya falling into ice-cold water. Her supposedly perfect life with Ting had become emotionally barren for her, just like globalization has for the rest of us. And Siaya doesn't owe anything to anyone. She gives because she has it to give, and learns to draw boundaries and rest when she needs to. She's not a perfect person. I said before, she's a very main character. The kids, the community, they always come first, whether in baseball, like when Siaya nearly loses the game protecting Bun, or in any of the other million examples I've already talked about here. There is nothing wrong in finding monetary satisfaction if that matters to you, but in the case of North of North and many other shows these days, the mirror of reality is showing a very different reflection, one geared towards meaningful work and service in community building, in giving to others to find meaning rather than just financial resources. Because, and I hope this isn't true, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm not sure these communities will ever be cared for in the way that they deserve to be, and the constant threat and reality of budget cuts just makes you wonder, why are these places that have been so historically marginalized still being cut apart? Haven't we evolved to be better, more liberal-minded people? No, because that would mean doing more than just lip service to the tragedies that have punctuated the lives of these people. What else can you cut from a school or a community center? Why are they always the first targets? And even if they aren't in real life Nunavut, it feels pretty convincing that they would be, because we've all just accepted that this world of structural failure is the only reality. What is scary is that if we should continue down this trajectory that we are on, of being only business-minded, then places like the Arctic will suffer in all new ways. Places in the crossroads of resources like the Middle East become battlegrounds, much like the Arctic could soon be. The main storyline of this series, the new research station coming to the Arctic, is based around real-life increasing interest in the Arctic. As the ice melts, resources like precious metals and oil are opening, as well as potential shipping lanes in the region. In case you were wondering why Trump is going after Canada so hard. This is the danger in keeping this business-minded line of thinking despite changing public opinion. Globalization, supply-side economics, the proliferation of business, unfortunately it doesn't just stop because we value something else. The rich also like what they like. So what is the final message here? Community is everything. Service is everything. We have to lean on each other to survive because neither business nor government or anyone else is coming to save us. We have to take what we can get from them and do the best with what little we have. I think, though, the core emotional message is best summed up in Siaya's speech here to the committee, making the case for Ice Cove to be the site of the next Arctic research station.
You see that hole in the wall?
Or not. You don't have to look.
My predecessor had a bad day, and we could have papered over it, but why? It's part of this place's story. What's that saying? Cracks are to let the light shine in? I think it's the opposite. Sometimes the cracks are there to let the light shine out. So, if you want to study the real Arctic, You need to be here. For too long, people have been coming to the Arctic to try and change us. But I'm asking you to let this place change you.
Truly, we must let places simply be as they are. They are not spaces to be reformed or changed somehow. They are homes for people, filled with their own cultures, rules, and histories. And they have value by virtue of existing. Life is beautiful because it is happening here, right now, in all its messy glory. Imagine if we just let them exist as they are without any interference, with resources, without strings attached. How beautiful could that be? Because globalization by the internet was always supposed to be for their good, to democratize and open the world for everyone, from any corner of the world, to embolden human rights and democracy to create a fully collective consciousness. Yet, whether by nature or hijacked by the elite, it seems to have had an opposite effect, isolating us all to our own strange little bubbles. But that isn't the case in this community and others like it. They can stay together through anything because they have had to, in this case, for thousands of years. They will survive no matter what because of their culture, their values, and their knowledge. They have survived changes in governance, in global philosophies, and in the kind of resources they receive through colonization, racism, stolen children, missing women, violence, and so much more. They have endured, and usually by the power of women. No matter what change comes for them from the outside world or challenges from things like climate change, they are enduring, beautiful in their own ways, and valid simply for existing as they are. And like I said before, this story has been told for years. Other versions of this include Abbott Elementary, Chewing Gum, Yellowstone, and those are just the ones I can think of quickly. The story of humanity is one of community and places. It always has been, and no amount of propaganda is going to change that, which is a great thing, because it means we have the capacity to rebuild our world with these communities as templates. In the age of loneliness, disconnection, globalization, we need these people to keep the soul of humanity alive, the imperfect, unwanted soul of humanity that rests within small, faraway communities, beating slowly at times but never stopping. The connection with our friends and neighbors that we all wish we had. We shouldn't punish these communities because they aren't flashy, productive, ultra-modern, or lack some other idea of what we think the future should be. Small communities around the world have survived through changes of time and will continue to endure. And so, whether we like it or not, they are the future. Every part of the world is made up of communities like this. From suburbs in the Western world to towns and villages in faraway places, our homes will always rest in places. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.